This is the story of how I was wrongfully hanged in front of an entire town, rescued at the last second by a legendary outlaw, only to discover that the person who framed me, who orchestrated every twist of my downfall, was none other than my own sister. You're about to hear a tale of betrayal, blood, and redemption in the unforgiving deserts of the Wild West. So sit back, and let me tell you how everything I knew about family, justice, and survival was shattered in a single afternoon. The midday sun scorched the town of Dead Rock, Arizona, casting sharp shadows on the wooden gallows standing in the center of the square. Dust danced in the dry wind, and a crowd had gathered drawn by the scent of blood and vengeance. At the heart of it all stood Thomas McKenna, a noose tightened around his neck, the scratchy hemp burning against his skin. He didn't cry out, didn't plead. There was no point. They'd made up their minds about him. From the makeshift platform, Thomas stared out at the angry faces. Townsfolk clutched their children close, others pointed, muttering, condemning him under their breath. He wasn't thinking about them anymore. His mind drifted to his sister Mary and her boy, Timothy, sick and waiting for the medicine Thomas had promised to bring. They'd never know the truth, that he'd never stolen the stagecoach money, that he was innocent. The sheriff, a grizzled man with leathery skin and eyes like burnt stone, gave the rope one final tug. His withered fingers moved with calm precision. To him, this was justice routine, even. The preacher beside him mumbled a half-hearted prayer, more out of tradition than conviction. Thomas inhaled, expecting the end to come in silence. But then came the sound that split the world apart. A gunshot cracked through the air. The rope snapped into above his head, sending strands of frayed hemp fluttering into the wind. A second shot shattered one of the wooden beams beneath the gallows, causing the platform to jerk. Thomas stumbled forward, coughing, the world spinning. Around him, screams erupted. The crowd dove for cover, ducking behind barrels and horses. The sheriff spun around, gun drawn, eyes scanning the rooftops with panic. Out of the smoke and dust, a figure emerged from behind the general store, tall, lean, clad in a flowing black duster that snapped in the wind like a flag of death. His face was hidden beneath the brim of a wide black hat, and he moved with a predator's purpose. His revolver barked twice more, not at the sheriff or Thomas, but into the air and toward the ground, deliberate, scattering the already panicked crowd even further. Then came the thunder of hooves. A black stallion, massive and muscular, galloped into the square. Without hesitation, the stranger reached down and yanked Thomas up behind him. One final shot rang out from the sheriff, but it missed, splintering wood as the horse exploded forward. They vanished into the desert, swallowed by clouds of dust and confusion. The world flew past Thomas in a blur of sagebrush and sweat. The outlaw didn't speak, didn't look back, just drove the stallion onward with practiced hands and calm focus. Thomas clung to him, his heartbeat pounding louder than the horse's hooves. The town fell behind them, the sound of gunfire and curses fading into the wind. Eventually, the black horse slowed near a cluster of massive red boulders, a natural fortress carved by centuries of sand and time. Thomas slipped off the saddle, legs buckling as he collapsed onto the gravel. He looked up, dazed, his heart still racing. The stranger turned slowly, removing his hat. Underneath was a scarred face with steel gray hair and eyes that burned like winter storms. Thomas knew that face. Blackjack Morrison. The name struck like lightning. The most feared outlaw in the Arizona territory, a killer, a legend. A ghost whispered about in saloons and wanted posters, and the man who had just saved him. You're supposed to be dead by now, Thomas McKenna, Blackjack said, his voice rough as gravel. Thomas stumbled backward. How do you know my name? Blackjack didn't answer right away. He stepped down from the horse, his hand never far from his revolver. He moved like a man who'd stared death in the eyes and walked away grinning. Thomas's thoughts swirled. Nobody knew his full name except his sister and lawman. Bounty hunters. His voice cracked. Why would you help me? Blackjack smiled coldly. Your sister Mary sends her regards. How's Timothy's fever? The words froze Thomas in place. His mouth went dry. How do you know about that? Blackjack gave a bitter chuckle. Smart kid. But you're asking the wrong questions. Thomas's knees trembled as the implication sank in. He hadn't been rescued. He'd been hunted. You set me up, he whispered. The stagecoach job, the planted money, the sheriff. You orchestrated the whole damn thing. Blackjack's eyes glinted. Let's just say I created an opportunity and you fit into it real nice. From behind them came a low rumble. Faint at first, but growing louder. HOOFBEATS. The sheriff's posse was coming, and fast. Thomas turned toward the sound, panic rising. Blackjack, in contrast, seemed almost amused. He pulled a pocket watch from his coat and checked it with the casual air of a man timing a Sunday stroll. We need to run, Thomas said, voice cracking. Oh, we will? Blackjack replied, but not because we're scared. We've got a show to put on. Thomas's heart pounded. What kind of show? Blackjack mounted up again, then looked back over his shoulder. You're going to lead them. McKenna, he said with a grim grin. Right into the jaws of hell. Thomas hesitated. Every instinct told him not to trust the man who'd framed him, but the dust cloud rising behind them left no choice. He mounted the black stallion once more, wondering if he'd just traded the gallows for something far worse. And together, they rode into the twisting canyons of Redstone toward Betrayal, blood, and a past that refused to stay buried. The landscape shifted as the stallion thundered into the rugged terrain beyond Dead Rock. The red rocks rose around them like fortress walls, narrowing into twisting canyons where shadows stretched long and deep. Every hoofbeat echoed like a warning through the sandstone maze. Thomas clung to Blackjack Morrison, heart pounding. He didn't know what disturbed him more, the fact that he was fleeing a posse for a crime he didn't commit, or that the man riding with him was the infamous outlaw his father used to curse by name, the one his sister swore had vanished into legend. And now, he was dragging Thomas straight into something far more dangerous than a lynching. Blackjack said little as they navigated the serpentine passageways, guiding the horse through ancient pathways with unnerving familiarity. The man knew this place, knew every bend, every blind corner, every crevice large enough to hide a rifleman. That realization hit Thomas like a slap. You've been here before, he said, breathless. Blackjack didn't look back. I picked this spot years ago. Good for losing a posse. Better for thinning the herd. A cold weight settled in Thomas's stomach. You're not just running, are you? Blackjack finally reined the horse to a stop atop a narrow ridge. Below them lay a bowl-shaped canyon perfectly enclosed, with sheer rock walls on all sides. There was only one way in or out, the ideal place for a last stand. Or an ambush. No, Blackjack said, swinging off the saddle. We're not running. We're waiting. Thomas dismounted, his legs unsteady again. His eyes swept the canyon. Boulders lined the perimeter. High ledges provided excellent vantage points. The place looked prepared. You plan this, he whispered. Blackjack's grin didn't reach his eyes. Your hanging was just the bait. This is the real trap. Thomas's blood ran cold. You used me. You were going to die anyway. Blackjack sawed, almost casually. Might as well make your death useful. Thomas took a step back, fists clenched. Useful to who? To you. To justice, Blackjack replied without irony. The sheriff and I have unfinished business. Thomas's. Mine spun. This is about Tombstone, isn't it? The massacre. Blackjack looked up sharply. You know that name? Thomas hesitated, then nodded. My sister told me once. Said you were behind it. Said her husband died there. For a moment, something flickered across Blackjack's face. Regret. Maybe pain, but it vanished just as fast. You're not wrong, he said. But your sister left out a few details. Before Thomas could ask more, a sound echoed through the canyon. Hoofbeats, bouncing off stone from multiple directions. They're splitting up, Blackjack said, eyes narrowing. Smart sheriff. Dumb move. He reached for his rifle and moved to a boulder overlooking the narrow entrance. Thomas crouched beside another rock, hand resting on the revolver he'd picked up earlier. "You expect to take them all on?" Thomas asked. "Not all of them," Blackjack said, checking the chamber. "Just one?" Thomas furrowed his brow. "Who?" Before Blackjack could answer, Thomas spotted a glint of metal from above. His breath caught. On the eastern cliff side, just above Blackjack's position, something shimmered in the sunlight. A barrel. A scope. "Wait!" Thomas hissed. Then came the shot. A sharp crack tore through the silence, and Blackjack dove sideways just in time. The bullet sparked against the rock where his head had been. Thomas shouted instinctively. "Sniper! East wall!" Blackjack rolled behind cover, rifle in hand. The stillness shattered. Shouts rang out from the posse. Deputies dismounted and scattered. Gunfire cracked across the canyon. Dust filled the air, and the trap snapped shut. The sniper fired again, this time targeting Thomas. He ducked as chips of stone exploded around him. The sharp scent of gunpowder mixed with the dry desert air. Blackjack cursed under his breath. "Wasn't expecting that." Thomas's heart pounded in his ears. "You didn't plan for a sniper." "Not that sniper." The outlaw's expression had shifted, less confidence now, more calculation. From their position, Thomas saw the posse enter the canyon, weapons drawn. Sheriff Garrett led them, his eyes scanning the cliffs with grim determination. He shouted orders, trying to locate the shooter and coordinate his men, but they were exposed. Every step they took brought them closer to the sniper's crosshairs. "This isn't just a trap for the law," Thomas muttered, realization creeping in. "Someone wants you dead." Blackjack's silence was telling. The pieces were falling into place. Blackjack had lured the sheriff here for a reckoning, but someone else, someone smarter, had anticipated the setup and laid their own plan atop his. Layers upon layers of betrayal. Thomas peeked out from cover. The sniper wasn't moving erratically. Every shot was calculated. This was no hired gun looking for chaos. This was personal. And then, from above, a voice rang out across the canyon, clear, commanding, unmistakably feminine. "That's enough, Marcus. Let the boy go. Your fight is with Morrison." Thomas's blood ran cold. That voice. No. He turned his gaze upward to the cliff. "Elena." He breathed. His sister's real name, one he hadn't heard in years. Blackjack snapped his head toward the sound. "Your sister planned this," he said flatly. Thomas could hardly comprehend it. Mary or Elena was the one behind this, the woman who'd cried over Timothy's illness, the one who'd begged him to bring medicine. She'd orchestrated this. Blackjack's jaw was tight. "She's been after me since Tombstone. I didn't know she'd turn her own brother into bait. But why now?" Thomas whispered. Blackjack looked down at the canyon below, where the sheriff's men were caught in a web of confusion and gunfire. "She wanted us all in one place," he said, grimly, "and now we're all trapped." Gunfire echoed across the canyon like thunder, trapped and magnified by the stone walls. The posse scrambled for cover, ducking behind rocks and spooked horses. Smoke blurred the edges of the cliffs, making it harder to see the shooter and even harder to think. Thomas stayed low behind a rock, heart hammering. Everything he thought he knew about his sister, her grief, her innocence, her desperation, was unraveling like a bad thread in a frayed coat. Elena, that was her name before she'd vanished. A name buried with her past, but now it had returned, with a rifle's vengeance. Beside him, Blackjack worked the lever on his rifle, loading another round. His eyes flicked to the canyon's eastern wall, scanning for a weakness. "You didn't know she was Elena?" he asked, without looking at Thomas. "I didn't even know she could shoot." Thomas whispered back, "Well, she can. And she's good." Blackjack's voice was tight. "And she's not here just for me. She brought a sniper, a posse, and maybe more. This is a war zone, son." Thomas leaned out just far enough to see the sniper again. The rifle was steady, aimed directly toward the rocks where Blackjack crouched, but it didn't fire. "Not yet." From above, her voice rang out again, controlled, cold. and far from the sister Thomas remembered. "Marcus, the boy is no longer the target. You hear me? He's seen too much," came Marcus's reply, his rifle not wavering. "We can't let him go. Elena Mary, whatever you call yourself." Thomas shouted upward, rising just enough to be seen. "What is this? Why are you doing this?" Her voice came back like steel wrapped in honey. "For justice. For everything Morrison took from me." Thomas's legs went weak again. "Timothy's alive." There was a pause. Blackjack glanced at him, suddenly alert. "Yes," she said. "He's alive, and he's not your nephew. He's your brother's son." "Morrison's child?" Thomas's knees hit the ground. "No, no. That's not possible. It's the truth, Thomas," Blackjack growled. "She lied to you, just like she lied to me." Blackjack stood halfway, yelling, toward the cliff. "Where is he?" "Where's my boy? He's safe," Elena said. For now, the world seemed to tilt. Thomas clutched the dirt to steady himself. The sick boy he thought he was saving, the one whose medicine he'd risked his life for, wasn't even who he believed. His sister had spun a web of deceit, so convincing that even he hadn't noticed the trap tightening around him. "She used me," he whispered, staring at his dirt-streaked hands. "She used my love for her, for him." Blackjack's voice cut through his haze. "She used all of us." On the canyon floor, the sheriff's men were beginning to regroup. Garrett himself was shouting for a ceasefire, waving a white cloth from behind a slab of rock. "Whoever's firing from above, we're not your target," he shouted. But the canyon had no rules now. From the far side, another sound joined the fray. HOOFBEATS. Not just a few horses, dozens. Thomas scrambled up just enough to peer over the ridge. Through the southern and northern passes, two groups of riders surged into view. Dust clouds swirled behind them. Armed men, mercenaries, by the look of them bearing no badge or law. "They're not deputies," Thomas said. "Nope," Blackjack muttered grimly. "They're hired guns." "Yours?" Blackjack shook his head. "Hers." Panic surged in Thomas's chest. "She brought an army to finish what she started," Blackjack confirmed. Garrett shouted again, now realizing he was being surrounded. "What kind of madness is this, Morrison? Who are these riders?" Blackjack didn't answer. He was watching the cliff above, watching the sniper. Then the voice that silenced everything. A boy's voice. "Papa." Time froze. Every weapon paused. Every breath held. Thomas looked up toward the ridge and saw him, a small figure standing next to the downed sniper. The boy held the rifle awkwardly, both hands gripping the barrel. He couldn't have been more than 8. Timothy. Elena single quotes S scream tore through the canyon. "Get down. You're supposed to be dead." Timothy's voice was soft, but clear. "Mama's gone. You heard her." "I heard you. You wanted to use me." Thomas stood, stunned, heart threatening to stop altogether. "He's alive." "Barely," Blackjack whispered, voice breaking. "That's my boy." The boy shifted his aim, lowering the rifle. Behind him, Marcus stirred but did not rise. Timothy had seen everything, heard everything, and somehow, he'd survive it all. On the ridge, Elena Mary stepped into view, her composure shattered, her hair whipped in the wind, eyes wild. "You were all supposed to die," she screamed. "My husband, my life, everything gone because of your family." She raised a pistol and pointed it at her son. Blackjack was already moving, with a burst of impossible speed. He sprinted toward the cliff, scaling it with fingers dug into rock. Thomas followed, fury and fear driving him forward. Behind them, the hired guns began to hesitate. Without their leader's control, they weren't sure what came next. Gunfire faded. The canyon held its breath again. By the time Thomas and Blackjack reached the ledge, the hired guns were turning. One by one, they began to retreat. The trap had collapsed, not just physically but morally. Without purpose, the soldiers melted into the desert. Marcus, pale and blooded, struggled to sit up. "Been watching over the boy for months," he rasped. Didn't plan on falling for the kid? Damn woman tricked us both. Timothy dropped the rifle and ran to Blackjack, who caught him in trembling arms. It was the first time he'd held his son since before Tombstone. The boy sobbed, but Blackjack just held him, silent, down below. Sheriff Garrett's shoulder wounded, but still standing, watched with narrowed eyes. You're still coming with me, Morrison. And the kid, too. Blackjack turned, holding his boy protectively. You'll have to go through me. Thomas stepped forward. No, Sheriff. Let them go. I'll return to town. I'll answer for the robbery, even if I didn't do it. Garrett studied him. Why would you do that, Thomas? Looked at Blackjack, then at Timothy. Because some things are worth being hunted for. The sun dipped lower over the canyon, casting long, bloody shadows across the stone. The wine returned hot and dry, curling through bullet holes, dusting over broken rifles and smeared footprints. The battle had ended, but the war inside Thomas. McKenna had only just begun. He stood near the cliff's edge, watching Blackjack cradle his son. Timothy was alive, fragile, tear-streaked, and trembling but alive. That fact alone defied everything Thomas had been told, everything he had believed. You lied? Thomas whispered to no one in particular. You used a dead child to bait him, but he wasn't dead. Behind them, Mary Elena was still, a statue against the sky. Her pistol hung limply at her side, eyes fixed on the boy she thought she had lost. She looked like a woman unraveling, everything she'd held together with bitterness now slipping through her fingers. I buried him, she said numbly, eyes glossed. He was sick, barely breathing. The doctor said he wouldn't last the week. I thought ... if I could just make Morrison pay, it would be enough. Thomas turned toward her, grief and rage battling for control. You poisoned him, he said. You poisoned a child. Lied about it. Used me. What kind of justice is that? She finally met his eyes. The kind this world respects. I lost everything. Thomas, my husband, my home. Do you know what it's like to wake up and realize your entire life was built on a lie? Thomas's jaw clenched. Do you? That broke her? Tears slid down her face, but they weren't cleansing. They were corrosive, the kind that stripped everything bare. Blackjack rose slowly, still holding Timothy. His expression was unreadable stone, cold, but beneath that, a storm was brewing. Elena, he said, voice low, you and I have something in common. We've both taken lives. But what you've done here, this ain't justice. This is vengeance fed by madness. She pointed the gun at him again, though her hand trembled. You don't get to judge me. Not after what you did to James. James. Thomas asked. My husband, she said, voice cracking. Blackjack's eyes darkened. Your husband was Sheriff Garrett's brother. He was also the man who drew first on me in Tombstone. You want to paint him as a saint, go ahead. But I didn't shoot him in cold blood. He died because of you. She screamed. No, Blackjack replied. He died because he tried to outdraw a man he underestimated. Silence followed, the kind that feels like the air's been sucked from the world. Down in the canyon, Garrett shouted, Morrison, you ready to come down and answer for what you did? Blackjack looked to Thomas, then back at Elena. I don't have time to explain all the bodies buried in this desert. But I will say this. I didn't kill your husband to hurt you. I didn't even know you existed. Elena's lip trembled. I didn't exist until you ruined everything. Suddenly, a rustle from the ridge above. Marcus, the sniper, was trying to rise. Blackjack spun toward him, reaching for his gun, but Thomas stepped between them. He's done, Thomas said. He could have killed us both but didn't. He protected the boy. Blackjack hesitated, then lowered his weapon. Marcus coughed, blood speckling his chin. Didn't sign up for all this, just a job. Then the kid reminded me of something I lost long ago. Timothy stepped out from behind his father. You don't have to die here. Marcus gave a weak smile. Too late for that, kid. But Thomas moved forward, steadying him. You're not dying today. Not if we can help it. Behind them, Elena finally dropped her pistol. It clattered against the rock and bounced over the edge, landing far below. She sank to her knees. I don't know who I am anymore. Blackjack looked at her for a long moment. Maybe none of us do. They descended the cliffside slowly, Timothy riding in Blackjack's arms. Marcus supported between Thomas and a bent-over Elena. The hired guns were gone, and the canyon was eerily quiet now, just the last rays of sun and the long shadows of the dead. Sheriff Garrett waited with the remnants of his battered posse. He had a blood-soaked bandage around his shoulder and a look that mixed suspicion, confusion, and fatigue. Quite the mess you made here, Morrison. Blackjack nodded. I'm not denying it. Garrett's eyes landed on Thomas. You still turning yourself in? McKenna. Thomas took a breath, then nodded. Yeah, I'll stand trial, even though we both know you didn't steal that stagecoach money. I didn't, Thomas said. But if you're still looking to lock someone up, I'll go with you. Garrett gave a humorless laugh. You just walked through hell. Ain't sure a jail cell's any worse. Blackjack stepped forward. If he goes back to town, I go too. Garrett raised an eyebrow. That's rich. Blackjack didn't flinch. You want the truth about Tim Stone? About James Garrett. I'll give it to you. I owe the kid that much. Garrett studied him for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. All right, Morrison, but try anything and I'll finish what my brother started. Blackjack smiled grimly. Fair enough. As the canyon emptied, the group moved slowly across the desert floor. Behind them, the wind buried the last traces of the ambush, dust swallowing footprints, bullet casings lost to time. Thomas glanced back one last time at the ridge where he'd nearly died, where his sister had broken, where a boy had defied death itself. Sometimes, a family is just a bloodline. It's the pieces we try to mend, the lies we choose to forgive, and the people we bleed for, even when they betray us. He looked ahead to the trail and kept walking. The desert was quieter the next morning. As the first light peeled across the distant horizon, it painted the world in blood orange and gold. The aftermath of the canyon shootout still clung to the group traveling back toward Dead Rock like the dust in their boots, dry, heavy, and impossible to shake off. Thomas McKenna rode beside Sheriff Garrett in a makeshift wagon that now served as both transport and triage. The injured sniper, Marcus, lay in the back with a wet cloth over his chest, barely breathing. Elena rode in silence behind them, eyes vacant, her wrists loosely bound in front of her. No one had the heart to shackle her properly, not after everything they'd witnessed. Blackjack Morrison rode up ahead with Timothy, the boy curled against him, still too thin to pale, but very much alive. Occasionally, Blackjack whispered something to the boy, and once, Thomas thought he saw the outlaw smile a faint crack in stone. Nobody spoke much. There were no heroes on this trail. Just survivors stopped by mid-morning. They approached the outskirts of town. Dead Rock hadn't changed, still quiet, still dry, still pretending to be something righteous. But the gallows at its center had been dismantled, whether out of shame or haste. Someone had torn it down the night after the escape. Garrett pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the jailhouse. He winced as he dismounted, still nursing his shoulder. Well, he muttered, you boys sure know how to ruin a week. Thomas climbed down next. You gonna lock me up? Garrett gave him a sidelong glance. You willing to testify under oath about who framed you? Who organized the stagecoach theft? Thomas nodded. I'll tell the truth about all of it. Garrett exhaled, rubbing his temples. I'll hold you here a couple days, then we'll get a judge from Prescott. If half your story holds up, you'll walk. Blackjack swung down from his horse, setting Timothy gently on the ground. The boy looked up at him, uncertain. Go on inside, Blackjack said. Sheriff'll see you're fed. Timothy didn't move. Will you be there too? Blackjack looked at Thomas, then at Elena, who still hadn't spoken, then back at the boy. I'll be close, he promised. Timothy nodded and followed the sheriff inside. Once they were alone in the street. Blackjack stepped closer to Thomas. There was something new in his eyes, regret, maybe. Or something even heavier. You know, I never meant for it to go this far, Blackjack said. Thomas didn't answer. I just wanted the sheriff in that canyon, that's all. I never knew your sister would do what she did. She was broken, Thomas said. But so were you. So was I. They stood in silence for a long moment, neither quite looking at the other. Then Blackjack said, You asked me once why I saved you. Thomas gave a slight nod. I didn't. Not really, Blackjack admitted. I needed bait. But somewhere between the gallows and the canyon, you stopped being bait. Thomas's voice was low. What did I become? Blackjack didn't answer. Right away. I think ... maybe the only part of me I hadn't killed yet. Thomas looked up, eyes narrowing. What happens now? You testify. Heals what can be healed. You walk free. And you? Blackjack shrugged. I disappear again. Maybe this time for good. He turned to leave, but Thomas stepped forward. You could stay. Blackjack stopped. There's no place for me here. There's a boy in there who'd say otherwise. That made the outlaw pause. Later that afternoon, Thomas sat on the steps of the jailhouse. Garrett had allowed him to stay outside for air, a gesture of respect. Beside him, Timothy gnawed on a piece of dry bread, his small boots swinging off the edge. Is he coming back? The boy asked, crumbs on his lips. Thomas hesitated. I think he wants to, but wanting and doing are different things. The boy looked down. He's my papa, right? Thomas nodded. Yeah, and he didn't know about you, not really? But I think he's trying now. Timothy looked toward the horizon. I don't want him to go away again. Thomas didn't have an answer for that. Just before dusk, the townsfolk began to gather. Word had spread about the ambush, about the false hanging, about the lawman caught in crossfire, and the woman behind it all. Some came out of curiosity, some came out of guilt, and some came because, in towns like Dead Rock, news traveled faster than bullets. Blackjack Morrison returned just after sunset, walking slowly down the dusty street. No horse, no guns, just a man with a broken past and a flicker of something left to salvage. When the townsfolk saw him, there was a moment of panic. But he didn't reach for a weapon, didn't flinch. He walked straight to the jailhouse steps and sat beside his son. Timothy didn't speak. He just leaned into his father, and Blackjack put an arm around him. 2 days later, Sheriff Garrett called together the town's judge and a handful of jurors. The testimony was given. Thomas told everything. Blackjack added his own truths. Elena, to her credit, confessed in full. In the end, Thomas was released. Blackjack, however, was not. The crimes of his past still clung too tightly. He'd been given a choice: hang or serve. So Blackjack Morrison remained in Dead Rock as a deputy, a strange twist of fate. But the town needed protection, and few men knew death's shadow better than he did. As for Thomas, he didn't leave town. Not right away. He bought a patch of land outside the canyon, just enough for a shack, a fire pit, and peace. Some nights, Timothy stayed with him. They'd talk about books, rifles, and the kind of men they didn't want to become. One day, Thomas asked him, "Why didn't you run when you had the chance?" The boy thought for a while, then said, "Because someone finally ran toward me. Some men escape the gallows only to walk into another kind of noose, a bond, a truth, a family. And sometimes, that's the only rope worth hanging on to."